All right, let's just dive right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a pretty provocative book by Harm Timmerman called Culture of Delusion. It's one of those texts that essentially asks us to completely rethink the invisible forces shaping our modern world. Now, whether you find yourself nodding along or entirely disagreeing with his premise, Timmerman offers a genuinely fascinating framework for analyzing how societies actually change. He argues that the way we think, the decisions we make, and the values we hold dear, well, they aren't nearly as independent as we'd like to believe. Instead, he suggests we are heavily influenced by a dominant, yet entirely unseen, cultural ideology.
You know that classic line from the 1999 movie The Matrix? The one about the Matrix being everywhere, all around us? Well, Timmerman actually uses that exact quote to kick off his foreword, and it's a brilliant starting point. He makes the case that our modern cultural programming operates exactly like the Matrix. It's pervasive, it's totally invisible, and it's basically been pulled over our eyes. The author spent years digging into history, philosophy, and psychology to figure out why so many people today feel estranged, unheard, or even canceled by modern institutions. His ultimate conclusion? We are living in a constructed reality.
So, that brings up a massive question for all of us. Do you actually know what kind of water your worldview swims in? Timmerman posits that an ideology is to a human being exactly what water is to a fish, right? It's everywhere, we take it completely for granted, and honestly, we don't even notice it's there. Yet, it subtly directs almost every single one of our life decisions. If we don't realize we're swimming in the water, we can't possibly understand how the currents are pushing us around.
Okay, so what exactly is this water made of? The author defines it as the invisible, opaque processes embedded deeply into our education systems, our media, our art, and our politics. These institutions are basically handing us our opinions, they're shaping our values without our conscious realization. And the crucial takeaway here is that if we fail to critically examine where our worldview actually comes from, the author warns that we don't just swim in the water, we become playthings of the prevailing cultural currents, just repeating the opinions that others want us to have. All right, moving into the first major section here. The book talks about the Great Ideological Inversion, which outlines a massive historical shift.
Timmerman claims the water of Western civilization hasn't always been what it is today. He says it was entirely replaced starting roughly around the French Revolution. He calls this the Great Inversion. Basically, he looks at the original foundation of the West, which was rooted in Greco-Judeo-Christian thought and a Protestant Calvinist work ethic, and compares it to our modern paradigm. Over time, he argues, every single dimension of that original tradition has been systematically replaced by its direct opposite, creating what he calls a romantic Marxist worldview. So it's not just a subtle shift, he's saying it's a complete 180-degree reversal of civilization's foundational code.
To really hammer home how drastic this flip is, the author points to a biblical quote from Isaiah. "Woe to those who call evil good and good evil." He uses this to highlight his thesis that we are literally living in an upside-down civilization. The values and norms that successfully built the preceding civilization haven't just been forgotten, they've been actively inversed. What was once considered a total virtue is now viewed with suspicion, and what was once discouraged is now openly celebrated.
Now, it's not that he thinks this modern ideology is just a bunch of outright lies. It's actually a bit more nuanced than that. He compares ideology to looking through a keyhole. What you see through that keyhole is technically real, sure, but it's a profound oversimplification. The vast majority of the picture remains hidden, and that gives us severe tunnel vision. Because this specific ideology lacks common sense and fails to align with total human nature, Timmerman boldly declares that we are currently living in an age of delusion. So, what exactly are we seeing through that keyhole? To explain that, he breaks this new water down into two main pillars, starting with the Romantic order and its relentless pursuit of freedom.
Now, when you hear Romanticism, you probably think of, 19th century poetry or classical art. But Timmerman radically redefines it here. He defines it as a massive cultural paradigm centered entirely around the pursuit of unconstrained personal freedom. It is the absolute elevation of feeling over reason. The author argues that this ideology prioritizes our base human instincts above all else, basically telling us that whatever we feel is our ultimate truth, completely regardless of logic or historical wisdom.
And he argues you can spot this romantic programming literally everywhere, once you know what you're looking for. We're talking about the glorification of nature and the noble savage, the modern obsession with youth, the promotion of free love, alternative spirituality, drug use, and even the central, almost religious role of music in our lives. Timmerman challenges us to look at any television commercial, any pop star's lifestyle, or any modern movie. He claims these specific traits are subtly and implicitly embedded in the tone of almost all modern media.
So how did we get here? Well, the book traces this timeline almost like a virus spreading. It starts way back in the 19th century, adopted primarily by a few cultural elites. But then, boom, the 1960s happen. We see this mass cultural upheaval with the boomer generation, and what started as a fringe counterculture movement was pushed straight into mainstream adoption. And today, the author argues it is the dominant, unquestioned narrative operating inside literally all of our major institutions.
Which leads us perfectly into the third section, the Marxist order, which is completely focused on the pursuit of equality. While the Romantic order pursued total personal freedom and feeling, it partnered up with this second, equally powerful pillar.
Here, the author says we've got to stop thinking about Marxism as just some dry economic theory about money and the working class. In our modern culture, he defines it as a pervasive ideological framework that views absolutely all societal structures through the lens of power, struggle, rebellion, and revolution. It's an ingrained cultural lens that demands constant rebellion against any form of established structure. It's always viewing society as this epic battle between oppressors and the oppressed. In practice, Timmerman categorizes this Marxist order into four main anti-movements. Basically, he claims it's inherently anti-authority, meaning it rejects hierarchies, it's anti-capitalism, rejecting free markets, it's anti-Christianity, rejecting traditional morality, and it's anti-patriarchy, actively rejecting traditional family structures. The author's point is that these movements work seamlessly together to continuously dismantle the original foundations of the West, which leaves everyday people feeling completely unmoored and without a solid foundation to stand on.
Okay, so if we really are swimming in this upside-down water, how do we navigate it without drowning? That takes us to Section 4, the Eye of Horus and learning how to see through the matrix.
To find a solution, the author actually pulls a fascinating metaphor from ancient Egyptian myth, the Eye of Horus. If you're not familiar, the falcon god Horus basically goes to war against the forces of decay and confusion. He's defined by his piercing gaze. He has this incredible ability to see what others absolutely cannot. And by fighting to get his eye back, Horus is able to restore order to the world. Timmerman uses this as a powerful symbol for the piercing cultural insight we need to develop today if we want to see right through the modern matrix. And really, this entire book is an invitation to develop that exact kind of vision. He lays out three critical steps for us. First, we have to recognize these romantic and Marxist phenomena the second they pop up in our culture. Second, we have to actively decode the narratives we're fed daily by institutions. We have to stop and ask, wait, what are they subtly trying to tell me here? And third, we absolutely must understand what is really at stake. Timmerman believes that by seeing clearly, we can turn the ideology around and rebuild a culture where human beings, families, and communities can actually flourish again instead of just surviving.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, the author leaves us with a pretty heavy, provocative challenge. Will you remain a plaything of invisible cultural currents, or will you choose to examine the water you swim in? Look, it takes a lot of courage to critically examine beliefs you might have held for years. But whether you agree with his ultimate conclusions or not, developing that piercing gaze, that Eye of Horus, is an incredibly powerful tool for navigating the modern world. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive. Keep questioning the water.